Okay, whatever's good for you guys. All right, so this is Disclosure Network New York, and it's July 26, 2020. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we are doing a Zoom meeting, and we have been doing Zoom meetings ever since the virus closed our venue, which is the center on West 13th Street. So we're going to be doing Zoom meetings on the same date and time that we have programmed for our regular meetings face-to-face. The center sent me a notice that said we're not going to be opened until at least October and possibly longer. So that's the latest on the venue. So who knows? All right, so here we go, and welcome to everybody. Would you just say your first name and where you're from, or where you are right now? Go ahead, Rena. Why don't you start?
Rena, I'm in East Harlem.
Okay. Al?
Hal, New York.
Okay, Nick, New York. Anthony?
Anthony, New York.
Right, okay. Tom?
Tom in Forest Hills, Queens.
Okay, excellent. And Joseph?
Joe Foster, Oceanport, New Jersey.
Okay, excellent. Doreen?
Doreen, New Jersey.
Joycey, you're in Joycey, Goyle.
Joycey.
Okay, welcome. Okay, and Sonia?
Chelsea, Manhattan.
Okay, and Carol?
Chelsea, Manhattan.
Okay, very good. And then Frank, where are you from?
South Jersey, outside of Philadelphia.
Okay, excellent. Well, welcome, Frank. Very, very wonderful to have you with us. I've been certainly
my pleasure. My pleasure.
We're going to start then with Thomas. Thomas wants to talk a little bit about a subject that he knows something about, and he has a couple of visuals he's going to hold up to the screen. So, Tom, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. I don't want to take away too much time from Frank. Okay, I'm going to first show the book to everybody. The title of this book here is Socorro Saucer in a Pentagon Pantry by Ray Stanford. And this is about a rather famous UFO case from, I believe, 1964. And one thing about it that makes it a little different is that there was only one witness, but he was a police officer, and he was a senior officer and very highly respected. His name was Lonnie Zamora. Okay, this is a painting someone made of the craft, what it looked like when it was taking off, you know, in the desert there outside of Socorro. I'll try to hold it a little closer and try to pan back and forth. You can see
we can see it really well. Thank you very much for that. Okay. Yeah, we can see it clearly.
Okay, and this is a drawing from the book that shows what Mr. Zamora, Officer Zamora saw. I don't know if you can see, I'm going down, his patrol car is off in the distance there, right?
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah, and there's the craft, and there's a ladder down, and there are the two little aliens who got out. And as you can see, their heads are not drastically big compared to normal human beings, right?
Go to the other side of the craft, if you will. Pan over to the other side, too.
Okay, that's the other side.
So we can see, yeah, there they are. You see that? Go again up to the to the other
there's
side.
Where the aliens are, and there's the craft, you know, rotated 90 degrees from when it took off, and that's the other side of the picture. Okay. So
go ahead.
Yeah, the author of the book, Ray Stanford, is a UFO researcher, and I don't remember how he got called down there to see about this case, but he did, and he spoke to Lonnie Zamora for a long time about it. And he went out to the crash site and he took photographs. You know, the two little spots from the ladder, there were impressions in the sand. The spots from the landing gears, there were impressions. And based on, you know, the shape of the impressions, it matched what Lonnie Zamora said the shape of the landing, the ends of the landing gear looked like. And what Ray Stanford discovered, and he shut up about it deliberately, was that when the ship took off, it must have part of it must have rubbed against the rock and made little curly-Q shavings of the metal of the ship, right? Just like, you know, when you take a cheese slicer and you make shavings of chocolate, that's what there were, shavings of metal like that. So he didn't say a word about this to anybody. Then he went back to the crash site at 3 o'clock in the morning when there was nobody around, and he grabbed one of the rocks that had the metal shavings on it, and he put it in the trunk of his car and wrapped it up in newspaper. And then he sent it off to some lab somewhere to have the metal shavings analyzed. And it's really too bad that he didn't save any for himself, because the first thing they wrote back to him was that they don't know what it is and they need to work some more to analyze it some more. Then about a few weeks later, he got another communique from the lab that said, we regret, we apologize, what we told you last time wasn't true. All that the shavings are is silica, in other words, sand, right? So that's obviously ridiculous, and so they have the shavings, probably it's with the labs at Los Alamos. They probably know that it's really, something that doesn't appear on the Earth and so on and so on. Anyway, it was a very famous UFO case, and I was just chatting with Nick about it, and I mentioned about the picture and the symbol. Let me show you again the picture so you can get a look at that red symbol on the craft. Right.
Again, I can't see. Hold it up a little higher. Yeah, there
right
you go.
Right in the middle of the craft.
Can you describe that? It looks like Can you see what it is?
It's kind of like.
I'll make Tom to describe it.
It's kind of like a loop, open at the bottom with two little legs on either side of the loop, and then inside there's a straight vertical, and then there's two other short stripes at angles, like as if it's an arrow pointing upwards. Right? And so some people have said that, some people tried to claim that that's not what the symbol looked like, that it was really an inverted V with three horizontal lines going across it. And some people have claimed that that inverted V is a symbol that they have seen on the uniforms of some aliens. But Lonnie Zamora insists, no, this is what what you see there is pretty much what it looked like. And what he believes and what Ray Stanford also believes is that it's simply an insignia that the aliens use to identify the particular type of craft, And in this particular case, what it's indicating is that the propulsion system, is right in the middle of that loop. And that's what you see because, when you see the blue fire underneath where right when it was taking off, that's what Lonnie Zamora said it looked like. I don't think that they claimed it made any noise, but it certainly had this bright bluish white flame coming out of it right when it took off. So, okay, I'll that's all I wanted to say, and we can go ahead with Frank now. Thank you.
Tom, I wanted to make a comment.
A second, Tom, I wanted to stay with the subject here. As a graphic designer, all my life, I'm very interested in graphics.
Yeah.
And so, if there's any way to send me something a little bit closer up so I can examine it more, I'm very interested in that.
Yes.
I haven't been aware of other graphics on other UFOs before. I mean, maybe there have been, but I haven't heard of that. So this is the first time I'm hearing of something like that.
Yes, I made a larger version of that emblem, using the actual version of it in the text of the book, which is a little bit different from this, but not that much. And it's bigger, and it, I made this, maybe 25 years ago or something, so I have to locate the file, but I do believe that I'll be able to locate it and send it to you.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, are there questions for Tom on this subject? Carol, go ahead. Do you want something? Carol, did you have a question?
No.
No? Okay. Frank, did you have a question?
I had a comment. I wanted to mention to Tom that the shape of the craft was an egg-shaped craft.
Yes, that's exactly right. Uh-huh.
Isn't that interesting, too, that was the shape of it? And I didn't see any windows on the illustration.
No, I don't see any windows either. But there was a little opening, you see on the drawing, I think you can still see it. Let me get it back again. In the drawing, something opened up, obviously the aliens got out and they put out a ladder, and you see something opened up, no windows. And he said that when his patrol car got close enough, they realized that somebody was coming, and he said they quick scampered up the ladder, they hauled in the ladder, they closed it up, and they took off. They closed up the landing gear and they took off. Actually from the drawing it looks like they must have been closing up the landing gear as it was taking off, because you still see the landing gear in the artist's rendition in the painting. But they didn't want to be discovered. They didn't want to
Tom,
have to
we were
interact.
talking
Yeah.
earlier. There was an issue you had mentioned to me that was interesting. Was the timing of when they were there and when the Roswell crash happened?
Yeah. Okay. I just checked briefly in the book, and I must be mistaken. It must not have been the Roswell event. It was probably that event. I don't know if everybody remembers. Probably Frank remembers about. There was an event where there were some aliens who came down and they had a meeting with some chiefs of staff and various different people, and the aliens, were communicating with telepathy and telling the people in charge that they wanted all of the officers who had...
You're muting. Tom,
I'm
you're
muting?
muting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep hitting that button.
Tom, you're muting.
Okay, I'm sorry. The
Just
alien...
muted.
Yeah, is that better?
We can't hear you, Thomas. Take the mute off.
Okay, how's that?
Oh, much better.
Okay. The aliens said that they had I think they said they had a mock-up, a small mock-up with them, a small version of the propulsion system of their craft, and they didn't want the people with the firearms to have the firearms in the room because when they would turn this on, it would create explosions and damage and so on. And the people that had the weapons, they refused. And they started to reach for the weapons and open fire. And the aliens defended themselves. They used some kind of psychic, warfare technique that they have. And several of the regular human beings were killed in that. So anyway, I think it was that incident, where a lot of aliens landed. I believe that these ones that you see in the Sakharov landing here, they were coming one day earlier to try to sort of be an avant-garde to announce to everybody that this other thing was going to take place the next day. But the reason why they landed and why the two aliens came out, Ray Sanford and Lonnie Zamora think that it was because there was something wrong with the ship that they were going to try to repair. And then when they didn't want to, have to deal with the human beings, and they scampered away in a hurry, and they probably couldn't get it repaired in time, to go over and announce that the other thing was happening a day early. So the other thing must have just plain happened, and there must have been some way that the human beings knew it was going to happen on that particular day. But anyway, I remember very well hearing about that particular incident with the people getting killed, and I think that the person that I heard it from was another UFO researcher by the name of Scott Wolf, and he was the one who was the very last guest they had on the CompuServe UFO Special Interest Group, which I used to sign on to. This was before everybody was using the internet. And that Special Interest Group was closed from one day to the next because the lawyers for the group did not want people to commit suicide after hearing about UFOs from Scott Wolf the way they did after they heard about UFOs from some guy, I forget who it was. I think that guy who referred to himself as Doe. I don't know if you remember that incident where there were people who he told these people they were going to get sort of beamed up into the sky and go into an alien craft and zoom off to another planet. And I don't remember the details, but whatever happened was they wound up all dead. They basically, whatever he said was the beaming, they wound up committing suicide. And so CompuServe closed that special interest group down, and then there was no group that I had for all that time from about roughly 1996 up to 2001 where you guys formed DNNY.
Well, thank you, Tom. Are there any other comments before we move on?
I wanted to make a comment that Lonnie Zamora had incredible integrity.
Yes, exactly right. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
They could not shake his story. He had incredible integrity.
Exactly.
Absolutely, Frank. And also, Anthony, you had something too?
Well, I was just curious, Tom, with
Anthony, really loud and closer to the please.
Yeah, I was just curious with the context of, is this just something that kind of popped in your hand, or are you mostly interested in it because of the metal shavings and the symbol?
Well, of course, I'm interested because of the metal shavings. I was interested then, anytime there's any actual artifacts. And we're talking about something you can hold in your hand, not just imprints in the sand from the landing gear and the ladder. I didn't know about my Roswell artifact until 2003. So when I first came across this book, in probably about maybe 1990 or something like that. I didn't know about, an artifact I could hold in my hand, but that was what drew me to it. And it seems to me that there were other reports in other magazines and stuff that were talking about this case with Lonnie Zamora. Somehow, I don't remember how it got my attention, but it certainly did.
So I'm curious.
Again, Anthony, you got to talk really loud, please.
So I'm curious with this group. Out of all the UFO incidents that you guys know of, I'm sure individuals don't have artifacts for the most part. But how many incidents would you say there are people like us that actually have artifacts?
Well, that's a good question. There's no mention of artifacts. I read when France declassified their UFO files and they announced a website that it was on, I signed on, and they were divided into 4 categories. And, it was things that are explained, things that probably would be explained if there were enough data, things that could not be explained but there's not enough data, and things that could not be explained even if there were enough data. And that's the section that I looked at. And, of course, they were old. They went back to the 50s and 60s. There was nothing about artifacts in there, but that was this reminds me of the other thing that I told Nick when I was telling him about this incident on the phone. With my artifact, the very first person I contacted to see if he could recommend anyone who could help me was Bud Hopkins. And Bud took this very seriously. And he got out a little piece of paper and a pen, and he wrote something down on it, and he folded it in half, and he handed it to me. And he said, "We're not going to speak the name that's on this thing. You open it up and read it and call the guy when you get home, because I don't want anybody to hear me mentioning his name." And so I don't mention his name either. I took an oath of secrecy that I wouldn't reveal his name. But this man said that now that he had seen the shavings of my artifact that I sent him and analyzed them with his equipment, he said what he believes is that Walter Hout, who was the man who did the press release for Roswell and later became the president of the UFO Museum in Roswell, he put out an offer. He was offering $1 million to anyone who could bring an actual artifact, an actual piece of the Roswell craft. And a man came in and brought something. And he told the guy, for safekeeping, we're going to take your sample to the space labs at Los Alamos, right? And he never got it back.
There we go.
They never got back to him,
Right.
But then I forget this man's name. Oh, I believe it's Miller Johnson. I think Miller Johnson. Miller Johnson was a graphic artist, and he was the one who created the graphics on the facsimiles of the Roswell beam, the Roswell I-beam. I don't know if you remember that. There were 2 versions of the facsimile. One was kind of a light beige color and had the symbols in purple, and the other one was black and had the symbols in purple. And the first one had about 40 symbols, and the second one only had 8 symbols. And I believe the man's name was Miller Johnson. Well, Miller Johnson published an article in the newspaper in Albuquerque, and in it was a photograph of what he said was what this man brought in. And it was not what this man brought in, according to the scientist that I was in contact with. It was a piece of leftover metal from a jewelry shop in Albuquerque. And it was triangular, and it had a hole obviously cut out in the middle. And it contained alternating layers, about 7 layers of silver and copper. And so Miller Johnson, basically put out a cover-up that everyone accepted. And I mean, everyone accepted it except this scientist who I was in contact with, because he said, now that I have seen your sample, it makes me believe even more than I did before that what the man brought in was real, and he should have gotten $1 million. And so instead it was all covered up. Okay.
Quite a story there.
Yeah,
Thank you, Tom. Yeah. Are there any final questions before we move on?
I wanted to mention that Joe has some information regarding somebody who had access to some of the debris. And Joe, it's you want to mention to them about Bruce?
Yeah, sure, Frank.
Please go ahead.
A friend of ours, his name is Bruce Pearson. He
Joe,
actually
a little louder, please. I can't quite.
Okay, Bruce Pearson is a friend of ours, and he actually came across debris that was held by AT&T Bell Labs.
Wow.
When they were shutting down the Bell Labs in Homedale, all this stuff was being moved, I think, up to Bridgewater. And this one box had all these samples in it, and it's what they call the memory metal. And the box was given to Bruce, and Bruce actually knew what it was, and he hid it under his porch. He had to go away for several days, and there was a car that was out front. Apparently they knew that he had something, that when he came back, the box had disappeared from underneath the garage. But it was all these sheets. They were little square sheets of the memory metal, which you couldn't rip, you couldn't crumble it up. It always came right back. So, Bruce, that story is something. He has some other interesting points as well. So.
Oh, my God.
Thank you very much, Joe. Wow, that's incredible. Anybody else, any comments before we move?
I have one comment regarding crash retrieval material. I had mentioned the last time I was with you folks about Colonel Corso being given the responsibility of placing technology with U.S. companies so they could back engineer it and create patent rights so that there's a patent history. Yes. Well, I mentioned to this girl that I know who lives in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. She had heard me speak, and she said, Frank, she said, there's somebody I have to have you meet. And she said, I'm going to invite you over to my house and meet this fella who's now in his probably late 70s, early 80s. And I got together and I met him, and he was a little boy who lived in Philadelphia, and his aunt worked at the quartermaster facility for the Navy in Philadelphia, where they would design clothing for the armed forces. And he remembers his aunt telling him that this colonel came and left a piece of material for a fabric that they were asking her if she could back engineer and design that the military could wear. And after the Corso book came out, it all came together that his aunt had actually met Colonel Corso, and he remembered visiting her, and he said he had a box of Cracker Jacks, and inside the box of Cracker Jacks was a compass. He took the compass out and he put it on her desk and left it there. So his aunt told him, he was a young boy at the time, he was maybe 10 years of age, and he said, his aunt said that when Colonel Corso came back, that he told her, we cannot duplicate the weaving of this fabric. It's the most unusual and unique weaving they've ever seen before. And she said that it's not pure fabric, that it's got a composition of metal in it. And the way she determined that was she had this fellow's compass that he had left on her desk before Corso had returned, and she held this piece of fabric that was maybe about 2 inches by 2 inches near to the compass, and the compass dial would just spin around.
There we go. Wow.
Isn't that wild?
Absolutely.
So apparently Corso had brought to her some of the fabric of the Roswell, the crash occupants, some of their suit, hoping to duplicate it because they couldn't do anything to affect it with lasers or with acid or with, with any cutting compounds. So they wanted to see if it could be woven, and she said, we have no idea how this was woven.
Incredible.
Isn't that something?
Oh, yeah.
And that's never been published anywhere. I'm just sharing it with you folks for the first time since he shared it with me.
I love this stuff so much. I can't tell you. I love this stuff. I always have. Even as a little boy, this was like a big deal to me. It still is. It's like huge. It's bigger than just about anything. Maybe the Jesus coming. If you're Christian, you believe in. Outside of that story, this has got to be the big one. So anything that pertains to this subject, I am there. And everybody else in the group is also. Now,
well, Nick, there's more nuggets of this that continues to come out as people feel comfortable about talking about it. You know, I find that as long as you're non-judgmental, you're not biased, and you're open-minded, people will share things with you that are really extraordinary.
That's absolutely true. I know that's true too. Now, Joseph, I'd like to ask you, if you will, you know Frank better than I, so would you give a little introduction, the big picture, and introduce Frank? And Frank is going to talk to us a little bit about some of his experiences. So, Joseph, would you be so inclined to do that for me? You're muted. Joe, you're muted. There you go.
Okay. First of all, I consider Frank a friend. I've known him for about 2 years, and he's just a bundle of energy when it comes to digging out facts and being able to present them. He speaks at interesting conferences. He's a weekly guest on Jeff Wrench's show. Just a lot of information, and a good organizer and a nice guy. Frank, I can't say too much more about you.
You're very kind, Joe. It's a pleasure knowing you and being able to share information with you as we do. And these are really extraordinary times. I hope you folks have been as excited as I've been about the tease that the New York Times is going to do a major dump of UFO-related material regarding crash retrieval. That's another foundational stone that the public needs to be aware of for disclosure to be made. And this team of physicists, which I was told that Sarfati is like the public spokesman for, said that this information would be coming out, that the New York Times was chosen to be the public vocal point for this knowledge to come out. But these physicists and scientists, their responsibility is going to be that when disclosure is made, they're going to be able to say, they're going to validate the alien technology. They're going to be able to say, we can back engineer what they've done, we just can't align atoms the way they do right now, which is really phenomenal. And one of the physicists of this group, I think I mentioned to you folks last week, I asked him, I said, who's pushing this agenda? I said, is it the military? Is it the intelligence agencies? Is it the government? Is it corporate interests? And he said, give me 24 hours and I'll tell you. So he called me back the next day and he said, the push for this is coming from upstairs, from the visitors.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. That's what he was told by this nucleus of physicists and scientists, that this disclosure agenda is being pushed heavily by our friends upstairs. They want it to come out.
Oh.
Now, do you have any idea or any ideas here about more about that? Why now? Why now?
They keep saying that the time for reunification with our cosmic family and ourselves is long past due.
That I think we all agree with that. But that is. I mean, you just made my month. You did.
And they're telling, this is the word I'm hearing, that there's going to be major disclosures before the end of this year. And I think if this New York Times article comes out regarding crash retrieval and the technology that they found from it, that's going to be another foundational stone to make people feel comfortable about what's going to be told.
I got to ask you a question, Frank. When I see NASA sending up rockets with the fuel that they're using, or Elon Musk also now doing that thing, and I'm thinking, wait a second, that looks like what I've seen about 30 years ago as far as technology goes. And I'm thinking, we know that there's other technologies that are much more superior, and we're seeing something that these technologies have been around for many, many, many years. Why? Is it that they can't do the new technologies because then they're admitting that they engineered craft? Is that? I'm just guessing.
I've been told that has been an official form of distraction to keep people off track from knowing that we're much more advanced than we have been, than the public knows.
Right. I absolutely came to that same conclusion.
That chart I sent you, the Rockwell chart, that was sent to me by Colonel Don Ware. I don't know if your audience knows much about it, but I'll be happy to share it with them.
Please.
After Bill Tompkins was given the green light by the Navy to talk about his work with the secret think tanks and the work that he did for the Navy designing what's part of the Solar Warden fleet, which is a fleet of craft that we've been using off-planet for a long period of time. He got a Navy admiral to give him the green light to go public with us, and I was able to help bring him onto Jeff Rentz's show, where he began his official disclosure of what he was involved in. And I think it was after the third or fourth time he was on Jeff's show. I know Colonel Donald Ware, who was an Air Force test pilot, who's had his own experiences with saucers, and matter of fact is in contact with some of the visitors from upstairs. He's very quiet about it, but he has had his own contacts with them. He sent me the Rockwell chart, and when I received it, I couldn't believe what I was looking at, because it was talking about technology advancements into the year 2100, well into the year 2100. And when I got this chart, I called Donald Ware and I said, Colonel Ware, I always thought we were maybe 50 or 75 years in advance of what the public knows. And he said, no, Frank. He said, we're more than 1,000 years in advance of what the public knows. And he said, I want you to get this chart into the hands of Bill Tompkins, Bob Wood, who was also, he worked at Douglas Aircraft, and he worked with Douglas in one of their secret think tanks, not as deep as Bill Tompkins did, but for some 47 years. So he wanted me to get it to those two and also to Michael Sala. So when I got the chart to them and Bill Tompkins saw it, he said, Frank, he said, if they're letting this information out now, we must be very, very close to disclosure. He said, because this information, he began working on this in 1952 when he was at Douglas, okay? Wow. He took it with him. He carried it with him through every major airline that he worked for as a design engineer and also as in the research programs. And he said to me, when he first started this in 1952, his original chart for exploring into space was 20 feet long and 1 foot wide. When he finally worked at Rockwell, he reduced it to the point that it was maybe 6 feet long by 3 feet wide. And he said that it should be viewed horizontally for the mind to be able to accept the technology that's in this. I mean, it's an unbelievable chart. Rockwell said no, they felt it should be introduced to their own research teams in a vertical format. And when I talked to Dr. Bob Wood about it, he said, Frank, everything on this chart has been accomplished decades ago. And he said, we must be close to disclosure for them to allow this information to come out. And he talks about the chart talks about not only exploring planets in our solar system, but going out and visiting other star clusters and interacting with other intelligence in the universe. And in the margin of the chart has craft that were used to be able to achieve these goals. And they were the craft that Bill Tompkins developed when he was working for these secret think tanks. And more information about them is in his new book called Selected by Extraterrestrials, Volume 2. But that chart is so phenomenal. I shared it for the first time at a conference when I was in Northern California about a year and a half ago. And after I came off the podium, the guy who was doing the videotaping of the program said he was in Special Forces. He had heard about this Rockwell chart and how we were going out into space and interacting outside of our solar system. He said, I never thought I'd ever see it. So that was a validation to me that this thing was indeed not only real, but known on some levels. So when Colonel Ware gave this to me, I've been sharing it with people, and it's just really, really astounding because it talks about things we never thought we would have accomplished, but apparently it's been accomplished quite a long time ago.
Already. That's incredible. Okay, Joe, please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a small anecdotal story to kind of back up what Frank's been saying. Back in the late 70s, I worked for the Department of Defense, and I kind of made friends with another ex-soldier. He was actually in the Air Force. He was a tech sergeant in the Air Force, and he was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Well, anyway, he told me a story that he experienced in 1970. He and another tech sergeant, they were both nuclear qualified, so they had top-secret clearances. They walked into one of the hangars. They walked into the wrong hangar. It wasn't the hangar they were supposed to go into. And when they went in there, an experiment was going off. Again, this is 1970. Turns out it was a particle beam weapon that burned through an inch thick plate of steel, burned through that, then it burned through the back of the hangar and burned into a stand of woods behind the hangar. And he said what happened within the hour, they came in there, found the entire stand of woods because it was burned through. So what you're talking about, we're not talking about laser technology. We were talking about a particle beam, and that was, 50-some years ago. So what Frank was saying, 50 years ago was an easy one. You go out 1,000 years, can you imagine?
Yes, yes. And
the timing on this, what Joe and Frank are saying, the timing on this is blowing me away because I thought I knew how far ahead some of these technologies were. But what you're saying is light years more, much more than I even dreamt. And that's extraordinary.
Yes. Bill Tompkins also admitted on Jeff French's program that the idea that he had gotten in 1952 to create this chart was not his idea. It was given to him by the Nordic women that he was working with at Douglas Aircraft. And they looked just like us, but they were not from here. They put on Earth clothes, and they could just fit in with the population here. Every think tank that he worked with, there was one male and two females that were not from Earth. That they were helping him. They were assisting him telepathically to achieve what he needed to achieve. The man was here, the space visitor, the male space visitor was here to protect the two women. The two women were engaging with Bill Tompkins, and they were giving him information telepathically to be able to create the projects that he was able to achieve.
Wow. That's incredible. That absolutely floors me. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Now's a good time. Yeah, okay, Carol, go ahead, please.
Yeah,
wow.
It's interesting. I was discussing this with a friend of mine. I've been trying to get him interested in this. He used to have a radio show, and he writes for the local paper here in New York City. He won't accept it. He keeps laughing at it. He posted the New York Times disclosure article, the most recent one, and it was meant to be something to laugh at because he's very political. So some of his friends think that this is a false flag event aimed at affecting the coming presidential election. That is kind of frightening in a way because, well, either no one will pay attention to it, or if they do, it's really damaging. That's what I wanted to put out there for any comment.
Yeah, well, actually, since all you hear, and particularly in groups like this, everything in the mainstream media is a lie. You put it in the mainstream media, why should you believe it?
Doreen, you had a comment. Please go ahead, Doreen.
Yes, Nick. I wanted to mention about Donald Weir. We know Donald Weir. He's a Urantia student for many years, and we met him at conferences. And Nick, you were talking to him. You were sitting next to him when we were doing the quiz show at that time, and he told you a whole bunch of stuff. But he had a website for years, and he put out all the information. He comes from the Panhandle in Florida, and I remember he said he was moving to Alabama. I lost track of him, but Frank, I'm not sure. Right now he's still doing these things.
He's very quiet. He's basically being very reflective, and he's waiting for information to just unfold. He had told me something. There was a person that I gotten a chance to meet by the name of Commander Graham Bethune. He was a flagship status pilot for the Navy. He had trained with the astronauts that had been part of the Mercury 7. He had known Gordon Cooper. He knew John Glenn. He knew Edgar Mitchell. He had his own experience in 1951. You could probably look this up. He was on the flight back from Iceland to the United States, and when they were crossing the North Atlantic, he thought he saw a ship on fire on the horizon. But he said what happened was this thing was not a ship; it was actually a craft that came up and began to pace their plane, and it was 300 feet in diameter. And he said it did not affect their navigation instruments at all. And he said it went around the plane, and he said everybody saw it. And he said that when they landed, they were all debriefed, and they were told not to talk about it. And he told me that he had taken the General George Marshall on 2 crash retrieval recoveries. One was in Iceland, and he said the flight was filled all with Navy admirals and Navy commanders. There were some U.S. Scientists and British scientists, but no one from any other branch of the service, except Marshall was, a 5-star Army general. He flew them to that crash retrieval, and then there was one in Utah. And he showed me a picture of the crash retrieval craft that they had gotten in Utah. It was 100 feet in diameter. It was like charcoal gray. It had a slight indentation in it, like it had bumped into something. And he said that it was so light that 4 Navy personnel could lift up the craft. It was that light. But he said it was 100 feet in diameter, and he said he flew Marshall to that as well. Graham was the first one who began telling me that the Air Force was a straw dog in this. They were basically the distraction to let the public think that they were in charge of UFO research and things like that. He said it's always been the Navy. He said he was the first one that told me that the Navy had projects that were off planet, and he said this has been going on for a very long time. Well, he told me that he knew Admiral Byrd, but he wouldn't go into any detail of how he knew Admiral Byrd. Colonel Ware knew that I knew Graham Bethune. He's since passed. And he said to me, Frank, he said, I was at a conference in Los Angeles, and Graham and I got a chance to talk backstage, and he told me something that I don't think he shared with many other people, and Colonel Ware wanted me to know it. He said he flew after the war, probably about 4 or 5 months after the war ended in Europe. He said he flew Admiral Byrd and a bunch of high-ranking Navy personnel, English scientists, and American scientists to a meeting at the South Pole. Okay? And he said the meeting was with German scientists. They were offering to see if the German scientists would share information about the disk technology that the Germans had achieved during the Second World War. And the meeting went very, very bad. Okay? The German scientists said, we will not share any of this information with you. Admiral Byrd radioed back to the Pentagon saying that the meeting did not go well. He was told to come back to the Pentagon immediately and report all the details of that meeting. Colonel Bethune flew him back to the Pentagon, and he said that after he was debriefed, this was again in probably late 1945, they formulated the plan for Operation High Jump, which was to go down to Antarctica to try to force the Germans to share that technology. And that thing all went south, and we got our clock cleaned. But I never knew that until Colonel Ware told me that. And I said to him, Colonel Ware, I knew that Graham knew Admiral Byrd, but he had never shared with me about that meeting in Antarctica with the Germans.
And didn't they get attacked by what we would call UFOs?
Yes. And there's a Russian documentary. You can go on YouTube. There's a Russian documentary. How they got this footage is beyond me. It shows discs that are 600 feet in diameter flying over our naval craft. And I had shared that information with Bill Tompkins. I sent it to him on a jump drive, and I gave it to Dr. Wood, and Dr. Wood brought it over to share with Bill. Bill had seen the actual footage that was taken. He said how the Russians got it is beyond him, but he said that was actual footage. And he said the craft were 600 feet in diameter. They were coming out of the water and diving into the water, and they were like flying, around our craft and around our naval vessels like they were standing still.
So this was advanced technology that the Germans obviously had, and they were able to turn back Admiral Byrd's, I believe, a fairly substantial amount.
Yes, it was. Yes.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but the press buried this, or the government buried it. There wasn't any follow-up. Like, why did this happen? Why did they get out so quickly? That was all hushed up, correct?
You're right. It was.
Like it never happened. They wanted to, and they did. They were very successful about burying this incredible story.
And they lost a lot of planes, they lost several ships, and they lost quite a few men.
Yeah. I read a couple of books about this. It was absolutely fascinating. What Admiral Byrd. There was a diary of Admiral Byrd, and I don't know if that's fiction or not. Do you have any?
No, it's true, because Graham Bethune got access to it, and he said that. He said, Frank, he said, I'd always heard that this thing existed, and somebody apparently got him to have access to this. And he said he did talk about the meetings that he had with inner-Earth inhabitants, both at the North Pole and the South Pole, and also regarding what had occurred with that mission that ultimately led to Operation High Jump.
Now, what about the North Pole? Is there any? We've been talking about Antarctica. Any news? Anything about the North Pole or not?
Well, I've seen photographs of the opening at the North Pole, and I've heard of people who've gone into those openings, but it was, for official business. It's not something that's generally shared with anybody. But I had mentioned a story to Joe. I don't know if you remember this, Joe, but I worked as an account manager for General Telephone and Electronics in Mount Laurel, and this was in the early 70s. And one of the girls that was working with me there, I would share information regarding UFOs and the Hollow Earth story, and that there are bases underneath the ocean that the visitors utilize, and that there's no-go zones on Navy maps where they can't go into certain areas or go over certain parts of the ocean. Because of the underground or the underwater bases of the visitors. So I shared this information with her over a period of maybe about 8 or 10 weeks. She came in one morning, and she was white as a sheet, and she said, Frank, I have to tell you something. She said, you don't know this, but my father's a Navy commander, and that he had his own ship, okay? She said, I asked my father about what you said about there being openings at the North and South Pole, and that there's a hollow Earth, that there's inhabitants there, that there's no-go zones on Navy maps, and her name was Lori, and he said, Lori, he said, I'll only tell you this once. What you just said to me is true. Don't ever ask me about it again.
Whoa,
she said, my father validated what you told me, and she said, you didn't know that my father was a Navy commander. And she said, he was surprised that I knew this, but she said, he validated that they were true, and he said, never ask me about it again.
Wow.
That
was really, really something.
Wow. That's absolutely amazing.
After that, she said to me, she said, I had no idea that this kind of thing was going on, and she said, I had no idea that my father had awareness of any of this. Now, there was one other thing that I shared with her. I shared with her that there are visitors from other planets that are visiting down here that look like us, okay? And I could see that she had a hard time reconciling any of this. Well, her best friend got involved in a head-on auto crash, and she was in ICU for probably about maybe 4 weeks. She was in a coma. And when she came out of the coma, she got the hospital to call where Lori was working in my department. She wanted to see her right away. And she said, Frank, can I go over and visit with my friend? She came out of the coma and she wants to talk to me. So I said, sure, Lori, go ahead. I'm glad she came out of the coma. Lori came back the next morning, and she had that look on her face, white as a sheet. And she said, Frank, she said, you'll never guess what my friend told me. And I said, what did she tell you, Lori? She said, right after the moment of impact, she said, I could see myself in the crash. My body was there. And she said, a flying saucer came down right by the highway, and these beings came out that looked just like we do. But she said they were wearing one-piece suits. And she said they started working on me like medical officers using devices that she's never seen. And she said, they worked on me up until the time that I came out of my coma. And she said, I wanted to tell you about this, Lori. She said, isn't this fantastic? And Lori's friend knew nothing about visitors or UFOs or anything like that, but she shared that story, and she said, Lori, they actually helped me. And Lori was blown away by that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess so. That's incredible.
So she had two validations about information she had no awareness of, one validation from her father and one from her best friend.
Right. Valiant Thor. There's stories about Valiant Thor. Some people have attacked it as totally fiction. Other people have said, no, it's true. Does anybody have any, Frank or Joe or anybody else, do you have any feelings about Captain Valiant Thor and staying at the Pentagon?
I believe it really occurred, and I got a chance to meet Dr. Frank Stranges several times when I lived out in California, and he had an office in Van Nuys, which Valiant Thor would come to visit him at. And one time he was at the Rainbow Rose Conference in Los Angeles, and it was a huge event out there. It was like a 5-day event. So he was to go on as a speaker, and I went backstage and I got a chance to talk to him and his wife Victoria. And I said, Dr. Stranges, have you seen Valiant Thor recently? And his wife said to me, we saw him this morning before we came here. And I said, can you tell me about this? And she said, their front door was never locked. And she said Valiant Thor had full access to their home whenever he wanted to come to see them. She said, this was on a Sunday morning. She said he walked in the front door and she was having a migraine headache. She said she was sitting at the dining room table in an upright chair. And she said as soon as she walked in, Valiant Thor sensed something about her was not right. He walked over behind her, put a hand on each one of her shoulders, and she said the pain and discomfort went away instantaneously. And I said, what was the sensation that you felt? And she looked at me, she was quiet, and she said, I felt the presence of the Lord move through me.
Wow. Oh, what a story. Oh, you just made my month again. Oh, my God, what a story. What a story.
I mean, it's actually incredible. And, you know,
had offered advanced technologies to the president at the time in exchange for the idea that we would go away and stop nuclear testing, nuclear weapons, stay away from that because we were children playing with fire. And that was the deal. And according to the story, he was turned down. That we can't agree to this. No deal. And eventually, is that pretty much the way it was?
Well, he didn't return to Venus. He asked for this position to work with uplifting the consciousness of the planet. And after his 3-year stint at the Pentagon, and this is an interesting tie-in. George Filer, Major Filer, worked as a courier to Curtis LeMay from other generals in the Air Force. So he got to the Pentagon quite a bit. And when he would go to the Pentagon, they would say to him, I think at the time he was a lieutenant, they said, Lieutenant Filer, be careful, you may meet a spaceman while you're there. He didn't know what the hell they were talking about. This one day, when he was carrying documents to Curtis LeMay, they were passing the cafeteria, and the guard that was escorting Filer to that meeting, they were passing the cafeteria, and he said the space visitor is in the cafeteria having a bite to eat. And George wanted to go in there and see him, but they said, no, you got to go to Curtis LeMay's office. So he didn't know anything about the Valiant Thor story and Valiant Thor being there for 3 years until years later. He had heard about Dr. Stranges, and Dr. Stranges started revealing this information. But he said, Frank, he said, I thought they were kidding me about a spaceman being at the Pentagon. And he said, these people I was dealing with, they didn't play games. They didn't joke around. Now, here's another little known story I'll share with you. Graham Bethune was very interested in the Valiant Thor story, and he began communicating with Dr. Stranges. He said to him, Valiant Thor's craft is called Victor 1. It's a huge craft that's parked off of Lake Mead, or it's above Lake Mead. And I was given a photograph that somebody had the opportunity to take a photograph of this at nighttime because it's cloaked in invisibility. It's a beautiful craft. It's like 300 feet in diameter.
Whoa.
So Commander Bethune asked Dr. Stranges, he said, I have a request. Can you ask Valiant Thor if it would be possible to see a blueprint of his ship? And Dr. Stranges said, nobody's ever asked that before. Let me find out from Val if that's at all possible. So he contacted Major Filer back probably about a week later, and he said, Val said that he will give me a copy of the blueprint of Victor 1 to give to Commander Bethune, but he said it cannot be mailed. Commander Bethune would have to come out to Dr. Strange's home in Van Nuys, and he'll give it to him personally.
Right.
So Commander Bethune was retired from the Navy, so he could fly anywhere he wanted free of charge. And believe me, he took a lot of trips. So he went out there, he met with Dr. Strange's, he flew back, he contacted me as soon as he landed. He said, Frank, we got to get together, I want you to see this. So we got together at a restaurant, we asked for a quiet table, he opened up his briefcase, and he unfolded this blueprint of the craft. And I'm telling you, it was unbelievable.
Oh, my God.
I wish I had a photograph of it. It was absolutely unbelievable. He said, look what Valiant Thor gave to Dr. Strange's for me to have.
You know,
and it was all hand-drawn. It was beautiful.
On so many levels. And the fact that it, in my gut, I thought this is real. This happened. The fact that he stayed in the Pentagon for 3 years, that's a huge amount of time.
Yes. And he met not only with Eisenhower, but Nixon as well.
That's next, right. Now, you said that the reason he was there for so long was that he was trying to uplift humanity in different ways. But
yes, and they all they wanted to know was the secret of the propulsion that his craft utilized, how his suit could repel laser beams, their secret to longevity and things like that. And he said no. He said it was like giving matches to children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I asked Dr. Strange, as I said, after Valiant Thor left the Pentagon, what was the next aspect of his mission? And he said, Frank, it was a 4-phase program. He said each phase was to last 10 years. The first phase was to contact military, or not military, but government leaders all around the world to tell them that there are visitors from other planets that are working to help uplift the planet Earth. And he said it was a 10-year period. So for 10 years they went around and none of the world leaders would come forward with this. So the next phase they went into was to contact all the religious leaders of world religions. And that occurred over a 10-year period. And I said to him, I said, Dr. Strange, when he met with the Pope, what was the comment that came out of the Vatican? And he said, the Pope said to Valiant Thor, you row your boat, we'll row ours. That was an exact quote that he told me.
Yes, repeat that, please.
And the Pope said to Valiant Thor, if he asked him if he would be willing to come forward and admit that we're part of a cosmic family and that there's visitors here from other planets. And the Pope replied, you row your boat, we'll row ours.
Whoa.
I mean, that was a heavy-duty comment. I can remember to this day how he said it to me. Then he said, that went on for 10 years. Then the next phase was another 10-year program to contact university and college presidents to have them come forward and admit that we're part of, a cosmic family, that there's visitors here from other planets that are more aware than we are. That failed, okay? After those 3 phases, and each one lasted 10 years, failed, they went into a grassroots movement where they started to share information quietly among individuals to try to get the information out to the public so the public would become acclimated to this and accepting of it, and that's what's been going on.
If I could jump in here, and this is anecdotal. Howard and Connie Manger, who lived in Highbridge, New Jersey, which is part of Clinton Township. That's where the first story that I had seen about Val Thor took place in like 1958. Now, he may have been doing all of his other things, but he actually showed up at 2 meetings. They had a UFO meeting at Highbridge. They had pictures of him sitting there along with a woman and another male that were supposedly his crewmates.
There were visitors, 2 men. There was one man and 2 other women that were space visitors. There's color photos. I'll send them to you, Nick.
Were there? Thank you. Were there other crew people that stayed on the ship?
There were, yes. Valiant Thor is not. He's not born of a woman. He has no navel, okay? He's a created being. Everybody else that's working with him in this program, they are born of women, okay? He's a created being. So he is different than these others. But he calls them his brothers and sisters because there's no disrespect. He's not claiming any authority over them, but they know that this guy is a very, very important person.
Here's a question on that subject. I read the Urantia book. I was raised Christian. I do believe in the universal Father God. What is the religious insights of Valiant Thor? Did they acknowledge a?
That's a great question. When Dr. Strange's he had a background in intelligence. He had worked for the FBI. He was also a UFO researcher, and he was also a minister. So he started going around and giving lectures about the Bible and UFOs, that there were hints in the Bible that there's visitors here. They've been interacting with us, in the Old Testament and the New Testament. So when Joe mentioned about Valiant Thor being at Howard Menger's home at High Bridge, New Jersey, the photographs of him were taken by, he was a photographer during the Second World War, and he was very interested in UFOs. His name was August Roberts. They called him by the name Augie. So he gave the photographs to Dr. Strange's, and Dr. Strange's would show these photographs at the end of his conference, saying, this is supposedly a visitor who's from another planet, who's down here trying to uplift consciousness. Well, he gave a conference in Washington, D.C., and at the end of the conference, people were coming up to him and asking him questions and things like that. And a woman came up to him and she said, Dr. Strange, I have to talk to you immediately. I need to have a private meeting with you. And he said, well, can you wait? There's these other people here I'm trying to talk to. She said, no, you have to talk to me immediately. So they went into a private office, and she said, the photograph that you're showing of a person who's not from here, who claims not to be from here, he wants to meet with you. And Dr. Strange said, he wants to meet with me. And she said, yes. She said, here's a meeting set up for the next day at the Pentagon. You're to meet with him, and I'm going to pick you up and take you to the Pentagon. And she said, just follow my instructions to you, and you'll be able to get through the security there. And he said, I don't have any security badges or clearance with me now. He said, I've been out of the service for a while. She said, don't worry about it. She took him through three rings of security, and she took him to a door, which is where the Joint Chiefs of Staff meet. And she said, the person you're to meet is behind that door. So he said, are you coming in with me? She said, no, I'm not invited. She said, you're the one that's invited. So he goes into the room, and the desks for the Joint Chiefs of Staff are off to the right, and they're in an office that overlooks the center court of the Pentagon. And he says he saw this person standing in a suit by the window looking out the window. And he walks over to him, and he said, Dr. Frank Stranges, it's nice to meet you. And he said it was the guy whose photograph was given to him by August Roberts. And he said he was about 6'1". He said he had like chestnut-colored hair. He had, he looked just like we do. And she said he had no fingerprints. No palm prints, no fingerprints, okay? And he said to him, why is it that you have no handprints or fingerprints? And he said, fingerprints are the mark of man that only exists on Earth.
Whoa.
Listen to this. And then he said to him, and he said, I'm a minister, Mr. Thor. And he said, to you folks, to the inhabitants of Venus, do they have a Bible? And he said, no. And Dr. Strange said, why not? And he said, we never stop walking with the Lord.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty profound, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Oh boy. Wow, you just sent a chill. I'm not kidding. Wow, Doreen, you must be also just... Doreen's also a member of the Urantia group. Doreen, this kind of confirms even more some of the Urantia teachings. I can't tell you what an exciting hour and a half this has been. I mean, oh my God, this is just amazing. This is what.
Could you hold on just for one moment, please? Hold on just one moment.
Of course.
Oh, Nick,
I have something to say.
Okay, well, Carol, just wait till Frank comes back so he can hear what you're saying. Okay, because it might trigger him to say something. Just give him a second. What an amazing amount of information, and it's confirming. Doreen also.
Yeah, well, Nick, I was just reading that they said the Danos, the very high magisterial sons, visit this planet all the time. They just said we are not intelligent enough for them to stay here. They just check on us to see how we have evolved. And there's so many groups of beings that have come and in different areas on the planet. Your anthropo talks about them everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it's not a surprise, of course, and they're higher beings, and of course higher beings know of, the supreme being, the higher, God consciousness. I mean, this is because they're created beings. So it's amazing, but it's wonderful to hear the confirmation.
It is.
People here that have seen them.
It's such an amazing amount of good information, and it's really connecting the dots on so many levels. It's so thrilling. I just feel like we're on the cutting edge of like one of the biggest story, right? Oh my God! I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. It's just I can't tell you. I am thrilled with what we just heard. Yeah. Joe.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
The only other point, and this is again anecdotal. My mom was born and grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and Connie Menger. They went to school together at Baton High School, which is an all-girls high school there. And Connie was 2 years older than my mom. And when I was a kid, back in the late 40s, we lived very, very briefly in Clinton, which is Clinton Township, which Highbridge is a village in Clinton Township. We had no dealings with them. It's just that the synchronicities of how things kind of flow, through time and whatnot, that there are those types of incidents that are meaningless, but they mean something.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Frank, you back?
Yes, I am. I wanted to say to you that Dr. Stranges would say to people, if you have any questions that you would like to address to Valiant Thor, he said, I've been told to give you my mailing address in Van Nuys.
Wow.
Send me whatever it is that you wanted to find out, and I will give it to Valiant Thor, and it'll be mailed back to you. So he said he was getting in mailings from all over the world in all different languages. And, he only spoke English and he knew Italian, of course, because Dr. Stranges is Italian by his historical background, his ancestral background is Italian. So he would give the letters to Valiant Thor. Valiant Thor would give him back the letters sealed and addressed to the person who originally corresponded with him, and he said, I had no idea what was in those letters, but he said everyone that was given to me to give to Valiant Thor would answer, and he said I mailed them back to the people, and he said those letters went all over the world.
And didn't Valiant Thor also could speak and write many world languages?
Yes, they said he knew all languages.
All language. That's right. I heard. Carol, you had a question. Your hand was up before.
I had a comment.
Go ahead, please.
Over more than 20 years ago, I had a chance to talk to Frank Stranges at a UFO conference in Phoenix. I'm not going to. I do believe in the existence of such things. I'm not a believer in Valiant Thor. I just want you to know that. That's one.
Okay.
All right.
Also, the CBS, also Dr. Stranges, Mrs. Stranges, or Dr. Stranges, I knew him as Dr. Stranges. He was not rude to me, but he was very dismissive of. Just wanted, I wasn't worth responding. Let's just say that.
Wow.
So in the year 2008, the Vatican had a conference where they discussed the possibility of alien sentient life forms on other worlds, and they came up with, maybe they've changed with the years, but they came up with the belief that it is possible, it does exist. I'll put in the link to the article if people want to look it up.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Carol. Anybody else?
Very good.
On the group, anybody else you want to comment? Anthony, do you have anything? Not the woman. Okay. And Tom, do you have anything you want to put in here?
Yes. When I went to the celebration in Roswell in 2007 of the 60th anniversary of the crash, there were guest speakers, And the very last day, which was a Sunday, in the morning, the guest speaker was, what's that man's name? Sergeant Clifford Stone, right?
Oh.
Yes.
And
Yes.
he showed us, well, first of all, one of the first things he said was that it has not been necessary for us to use fossil fuels since the 1950s.
Oh my God.
And one of the last things that he showed us on a screen, before the talk was over, was a blueprint of a craft, built by Earth people that could go faster than light. And I don't know how you read a blueprint, but all I know is that there were sort of quadrants marked off. There were kind of slightly curved horizontal and vertical lines going all over the thing that made little quadrants. And what they reminded me of is when they always show you those graphs to show how space and time get curved, according to Einstein and so on and so on. That's what it reminded me. This blueprint of this craft had those kind of lines all over it.
Well, that's interesting. Very, very interesting. And what you're saying about the fact that we don't need oil or coal or anything we've been using for thousands of years, because there's a whole new technology which would mean we can stop plundering our planet and the Earth, which would be huge. But there's so many vested interests with trillions of dollars invested in mining, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to stop at nothing to stop this story. And that's where we are right now. It's absolutely incredible dynamic that we are facing and have been forced to live with. Anybody want to comment on that? Go ahead, Anthony.
I'll get
really loud, Anthony.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to. No, just my comments. If we're going to get a data dump, by the end of the year, in terms of crash retrievals, I would think that this would point the way towards what you're talking about, that the public would begin to see that fossil fuel is not necessary. So I see this as a positive thing, that that could be the first door that needs to get open. Mm-hmm. That there's technology that you need to be aware of.
You think that Nikola Tesla also, because he was very much involved in this other technologies, do you think that Tesla had any, how shall I say this, contact of extraterrestrials? Is that a wild?
He said that he did. He said that he did.
He said that. Oh, I didn't know that. He said he had.
Yes, he said he had.
That is interesting. And did you know that one of the people who went to Tesla's apartment, hotel room at the New Yorker Hotel when he passed on at a very elderly age, that there were many, I believe, trunks with all his findings, all his writings, everything like that, and that one of the people is related to Trump. Did you know that?
Oh my God!
Yes, an uncle.
An uncle. And so the question becomes, did the uncle, by being there and having access to that, would some of the trunks disappear? You have to ask the question, who knew what, and it goes on and on, but that's just an interesting point.
Well, Nick, that would make sense if they're saying that we've had it since the 1950s.
Yeah.
When did Tesla die?
Okay.
40s.
Right around that.
I have a question.
Early 40s.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It just is. He had such extraordinary visions and experiments. Extraordinary stuff. And even then, if you recall the story, that he was stopped by, I can't remember the multi-billionaire who was financing Tesla, because he said, how can we charge for this? And they said, well, you can't charge, it's free. And that's when all the money stopped cold, and they tried to do everything to stop him. Because they here we go again, right?
Well, that's actually one of the questions that came up. If this, as you say, information dump, particularly on fuel and such, is starting now, do they have any type of plan in place for when the entire economy has to switch? Because you can't just say, okay, we're not going to use this anymore, the world goes bankrupt, and then a lot of wars and things. So there has to be some sort of plan put in place. I didn't know what anybody thought about that.
Any comment?
I've been told that there is a plan to ease this transition, but they said the major problem is the petroleum industry, because it's $40 trillion a year of business, petroleum and natural gas, and one of the last discussions I had with Colonel Ware was that I said, what is the status of acceptability to move forward with this for this cosmic disclosure? And he said he was told it's 83% green lighting it, and he said the remaining 17% were falling to the wayside fast.
That's incredible news. I mean, that is absolutely phenomenal news. Okay. Oh, Joe, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one caveat. One of the problems, and I don't think they've got this addressed yet, is that over a third of the world's population is directly involved in fossil fuels, whether it's manufacturing, working, or whatever. And the report that I had seen, I can't remember where it came from, but the report I had seen showed that the dislocation, the impact of leaving fossil fuels overnight would be worse than the effects of World War III. Mm-hmm. That
well, that's a major factor that you're identifying, and that does make sense. Okay. Anybody else have any comments on the subject? Frank. Doreen after Frank.
So go ahead.
Oh, Nick?
Yeah.
I lost the picture. I'm sorry. There were two people that I had seen on YouTube, and somebody from the movement, from the Urantia movement I met in Florida, told me about them. One guy, he was taken to Saturn. He said there's this gigantic, what do you call it? I don't know what you call it. It's not a vehicle, but it's like a rectangle that's outside one of the rings, and he was taken there, and he has about hundreds of interviews on the radio, and it's on the internet, and if you want I could send it to you, but he said they told him about the Urantia book. They said go back to Earth and find this Earth book, and he saw another guy there. He said he was from Georgia, a sharecropper's son, and he was shocked that he met somebody else from our planet. And I mean, the whole thing is fabulous stories that I never heard anyone else talk about, and I didn't share it. But if you want, you could share it with the group, and they could watch the interviews of what happened to him when he was there. It's just really excellent.
Thank you, Doreen. If there's anything you can send me on that, please do. I appreciate your comment there. Anybody else before we move on? Okay, Frank.
I have a question.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry.
Rena.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rena. Rena, say something.
Yeah, Frank, have you ever, this is getting back to the Germans and their knowledge of UFOs and stuff like that, and flying saucers. Have you ever heard of the book, Man-Made UFOs, 1994 to 1990, or 1944 to 1994?
So tell us about that.
What do you think of it?
I think it's valid. I believe that some of the technologies that were developed were in part due to reverse engineering craft, and some of them were actually provided by the visitors.
Now, the corporations took that technology from re-engineering, and didn't they do the copyright that it was invented in their labs?
Well, that's what the purpose of the Corso. He was like a Johnny Appleseed to plant this technology all around the United States for corporations to be able to patent, like Pyrex with, I think it's Dow Chemical. They had found something that we call today Pyrex on the craft, and it was given to Dow to create a patent for it, but it came out of the craft. The same with fiber electronics, with Velcro, with the transistor. They found that there, and a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Well, if you have any idea later of other things, I would be the ones you named. I'm aware of. I think we are. But if there's other things on that list, I would love to know that.
I believe it's in Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell, because he documents each technology that he planted around the country.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that.
Yes.
I heard a lot of the cell phone technology came from Corso.
Yes.
Rita, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What, please?
I heard a lot of the cell phone technology came from stuff that Corso distributed to the different companies.
Right. I got to go just briefly to another subject that's really a hot button right now, which is the aggressive push for 5G technology to be rammed down our throats without any substantial testing of if it was healthy or not. And the other labs have said, this is not the ones that are pushing this, have said it's not healthy. In fact, you can get cancer and many things from it, and that the viruses can be boosted by this high-level microwave radiation. And it's the worst thing in the world. And some countries have already said we're never going to put 5G in our country. So this has already started. I'm in touch with a group here in New York of lawyers who are fighting this in the courts. And right now it's at Albany. There's a bill. And I think I sent everybody, I know I did, some of the wording because it's so cleverly disguised that you don't understand what they're really saying. And what they're really saying is, we want to push 5G, and we're not going to be able to, you're not going to stop us. That's what it is. So right now there's a lot of, I believe in Albany there's a bill. I forgot the number of it. I sent it to everybody. And I'm going to ask the group that is the lawyers if we can get phone numbers and email addresses and bombard them with, we don't want this technology here. Because the more they hear that, the more chance we have. But the lawyers are very good. They've had literally hundreds of back and forth of crafting their complaint of why this technology should not be here. And that's a great group of people. I just wanted to let you know that that's going on. And if I get more information about that, I'll pass it on to our group and say, please write and call these people right now, because this is hot. This is a hot button issue. And we can't let 5G anywhere near us, ever. It's insanity. And also, Frank, you were talking about fiber optics. Well, for many years, fiber optics was being laid down all over the place. And then the power companies, and I don't know the exact reasons for this, but they jumped to the 5G technology, which is very dangerous. Fiber optics is not dangerous at all, but they... And there were millions and millions of dollars in the fiber optics putting it down. So I don't have the answer. I could guess that it's money, but I don't know if that's true or not. And then Elon Musk was sending all these satellites by the hundreds, armed with 5G technology to aim it at the Earth, and they said, therefore, you can be anywhere on the Earth, and we can track you, and you'll also be able to make a call anywhere in the world. This is insanity. This is a violation of every single principle of guarding our privacy, and this is going on right now. So this is a huge, and it's also in a second I'll get to the. It's also involved in the idea of something that will boost the viruses. Apparently, there's technology, and they're saying that this will boost the idea of the viruses impacting upon us. Now, Joe, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, the great danger of this whole thing, especially why going to 5G when there's so much fiber optic. It's not that they won't be using fiber optic, because what we're talking about is what's called the Internet of Things. That means everything that is electronic, probably in a short period of time, is going to be Internet capable.
Right.
And that means the wireless, when you blanket the entire globe with wireless, you have full access to everything that's electronic on there. They're all sensors. So your videos, your microphones, your cell phones, your toaster, the smart
toasters. That is insane.
Everything, your refrigerators, it's all part of the Internet of Things, and that will be available to be centrally controlled. You will not be able to do anything about it. The other thing, Elon Musk, he is going to have thousands of those satellites, but also Jeff Bezos and Amazon is also doing the same thing. He's racing to get his satellites out there. and it's all 5G. They're low Earth orbit. They're going to blanket the entire globe. And the thing is that nobody can get away from this.
George Orwell looks like he was optimist compared to what we're living with right now. I mean, this is insanity, and the general public hasn't a clue. I mean, they're beginning, thank God, they're beginning to get some kind of an idea, but we got a long, long ways to go. This is insane, and there's $1 trillion interest. George Soros, we could go on and on with the list that's in back of all this. There's a lot more to this, but I wanted to put that on the table because this is huge. I wish that our friends from other areas other than this planet would somehow help us, because if we ever needed help on this issue, the time is now. Right?
I've posed that several times, and I was told they are prepared to nullify what's negative.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh boy. I want to ask you, Frank, do you know who Mark Kimmel is?
The name sounds familiar. No, I don't know him personally, no.
Okay, Mark has been to our group several times. We've done it face-to-face. He's addressed our group. And also we've been on different Skype with him when he's been in other places. He and his wife now make their home in California. And I'm asking him if he'll do a Zoom meeting in the beginning of the fall. And please, everybody, don't miss that one, because
sounds great. Yeah.
Because he has amazing, deep research, and what he's got is incredible. And he's going to talk about that with our meeting. He just released something that I posted. Did everybody see it? Not yet. Okay, I posted.
Not yet.
It's from Mark Kimmel. Look in your dnny news blast, and you'll see it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well, now look at the time right now. I believe, oh my God, it's already 3:36. What an exciting meeting this has been. I want to thank everybody for sharing their insights. And Joe and Frank especially, thank you for your amazing, deep research and stories. I cannot thank you enough. You guys.
It's an honor and a joy to share.
Oh boy, and you've got an audience here that really appreciates that. I love you all. Okay, be safe, and we're going to be again meeting on this Zoom meeting on August 2nd at 2 o'clock. It's a Sunday. Okay, much love to everybody.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Many blessings.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Frank.